These black kids don't belong here." The loud voice filled the air as three 13-year-old black girls sat frozen in their first-class seats, their identical faces streaked with tears, as a white flight attendant accused them of stealing. This is the story of Jane, Joanna, and Joy Bennett, triplets who were about to experience the worst kind of discrimination, and the flight attendant who tormented them? She had no idea who their parents were. What happened next cost her everything. The chaos in first class was impossible to ignore. Rebecca Matthews, a flight attendant with 20 years of experience, stood over the three girls with pure contempt in her eyes. "These seats were not purchased for you," she declared loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Children like you have no business being in first class. Children like you." Those four words hung in the air like poison. Jane, Joanna, and Joy, three identical faces, three sets of terrified eyes, tried to show her their boarding passes, their competition letters, everything their grandmother had carefully packed for them. But Rebecca wasn't interested in evidence. She was interested in humiliation. And humiliate them she did. She accused them of fraud in front of the entire cabin. She denied them water when every other passenger received drinks. She confiscated bottles that another flight attendant tried to give them. She announced over the radio that there were suspicious minors in first class. She called airport police to remove them for trespassing. She told surrounding passengers these girls were probably runaways with stolen tickets. Three 13-year-old girls, shaking, crying, begging to be believed. Passengers pulled out their phones recording everything. Some whispered in discomfort. Others looked away, unwilling to get involved. A few started to speak up, but Rebecca shut them down with the authority of her uniform and her 20 years of service. The triplets had no idea what to do. They'd never experienced anything like this. Their grandmother had saved for 2 years to buy them these tickets, to make them feel special before the biggest moment of their young lives. And now they were being treated like criminals. But here's what Rebecca Matthews didn't know. What she couldn't have known. As she stood there degrading three innocent children, at the very back of first class sat someone who had been watching everything. Someone who had seen every cruel word, every denied drink, every humiliating announcement. Someone who had the power to end Rebecca's career with a single phone call. And that someone was about to stand up. Before we continue, if you believe no child should ever be treated this way, hit that subscribe button right now and tell us where you're watching from. We would like to know how far this video has gone. Because what happens next will restore your faith that sometimes justice does come for those who abuse their power. Let's go back to that morning, hours before this nightmare began, when three little girls were just excited about their trip. To understand what happened on that plane, you need to know who Jane, Joanna, and Joy Bennett really are. Because these weren't just three girls on a flight. These were three children carrying the weight of their family's dreams, their grandmother's sacrifices, and their own brilliant minds. And on that morning, hours before Rebecca Matthews would try to destroy them, they were simply three excited 13-year-olds preparing for the most important trip of their young lives. The Bennett triplets woke up at 5 in the morning in the small 2-bedroom apartment they shared with their grandmother, Patricia Bennett. The walls were thin, the furniture was secondhand, but it was filled with love. And on this particular morning, it was filled with nervous energy and excitement that none of them could contain. Jane, Joanna, and Joy were going to Washington, D.C. Not for vacation, not for sightseeing. They were finalists in the National Youth Science Competition, competing against the brightest young minds in the entire country. Their project? A revolutionary water purification system that could provide clean drinking water to communities in crisis. At 13 years old, these girls had designed something that could save lives. But let me tell you about the woman who made this possible. Patricia Bennett, their grandmother, was 67 years old. With hands so worn and calloused, they told the story of a lifetime of hard work. She was a domestic worker who cleaned other people's homes, scrubbed other people's floors, and did other people's laundry. She'd been doing it for 40 years. 5 years ago, Patricia's daughter and son-in-law, the triplets' parents, died in a car accident. In one terrible moment, Patricia, went from being a grandmother who spoiled her grandbabies on weekends to being the only parent 3 8-year-old girls had left in the world. She was already barely making ends meet on her own. Now she had 3 mouths to feed, 3 bodies to clothe, 3 futures to secure. Most people would have buckled under that weight. Patricia Bennett wasn't most people. She took on a second job, then a third. She worked as a housekeeper during the day, cleaned office buildings at night, and did laundry for a nursing home on weekends. She slept 4 hours a night if she was lucky. Her knees ached, her back screamed. But she never complained, not once. Because Patricia Bennett had a dream. She wanted her granddaughters to have opportunities she never had. She wanted them to go to good schools, to go to college, to become anything they wanted to be. She wanted them to know they were just as valuable, just as deserving, just as capable as any other child in America. When the triplets qualified for the National Youth Science Competition, Patricia cried for 2 hours straight. Her babies, her brilliant, beautiful babies, were finalists. Out of thousands of entries from across the country, their project had made it to the top 10. The competition was in Washington, D.C., and it came with something that could change everything: full scholarships to prestigious prep schools for the winners. Patricia knew what this meant. This was the door her granddaughters needed. This was the opportunity that could break the cycle of poverty that had trapped their family for generations. So she did something she'd never done before in her entire life. She splurged. For 2 years, Patricia had been tucking away $5 here, $10 there, whenever she could. She kept it in an old coffee can in her closet, hidden away, saved for something special. She'd been planning to use it for the girls' high school graduations, maybe help with college application fees. But when she saw those plane tickets to Washington, D.C., she made a decision. She bought first-class tickets. All 3 of them. It cost almost everything she'd saved, but Patricia didn't care. She wanted her granddaughters to feel special. She wanted them to feel valued. She wanted them, just once in their young lives, to experience being treated like they mattered. Like they belonged in spaces that the world often told people who looked like them they didn't belong. That morning at the airport, Patricia helped the girls check in, her hands shaking as she handed over their boarding passes. She'd never flown first class herself. She'd never flown anywhere, actually. But she'd heard it was nice that people got treated well, that the seats were comfortable. She wanted that for her girls. At the gate, Patricia pulled each triplet into a tight hug, her tears falling freely now. She kissed Jane's forehead, then Joanna's, then Joy's. Her worn hands cupped each of their faces as she looked into their eyes. "Make your parents proud," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're going to do amazing things. You already are. Remember who you are. Remember you belong anywhere you want to be." Jane, the confident one, the natural leader who always spoke up for her sisters, promised their grandmother they'd call as soon as they landed. Joanna, the sensitive artist who felt everything so deeply, drew a picture of a heart and tucked it into her grandmother's purse. Joy, the brilliant but painfully shy scientist, simply held her grandmother tight and whispered, "Thank you for everything." Patricia watched them walk toward the gate, her heart bursting with pride and aching with worry. They were so young, so small, but so brave. She waved until they disappeared from view, then sat down in the terminal and cried into her hands, praying they'd be safe, praying they'd be treated with kindness, praying the world would see them the way she saw them. The triplets boarded the plane, clutching matching backpacks their grandmother had embroidered with their initials: JB for Jane Bennett, JB for Joanna Bennett, JB for Joy Bennett. They'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, practicing their presentation, checking and rechecking their materials, dreaming about what it would feel like to stand on that stage in Washington, D.C. They found their seats, 3A, 3B, and 3C, right in the front of first class, and they could barely contain their excitement. The seats were huge compared to what they'd imagined. There was so much legroom. Everything looked expensive and important. For a moment, they felt like their grandmother had wanted them to feel special, valued, like they belonged. Jane sat by the window, already looking out at the tarmac and talking about the flight path. Joanna sat in the middle, sketching in her notebook, trying to calm her nerves through art. Joy sat on the aisle, reviewing their presentation notes one more time, her lips moving silently as she practiced her parts. They pulled out their phones and looked at photos of their parents. Their beautiful mother with her bright smile, their father with his kind eyes. They always looked at these photos before important moments. It made them feel like their parents were still with them, still cheering them on. Mom and Dad would be so proud, Jane whispered to her sisters, and they nodded, holding hands across the seats. Other passengers began boarding, filling up first class around them. Families, business people, an elderly couple celebrating an anniversary. Several other children traveling with their parents. The triplets noticed a boy about their age a few rows back with his father, also unaccompanied by a mother. Another girl, maybe 10 years old, sat alone 2 rows up, wearing headphones. The cabin filled with the sounds of people settling in, storing luggage, reading flight attendants. Everything felt normal, exciting, full of possibility. And then Rebecca Matthews noticed them. Rebecca had been a flight attendant for 20 years. She'd seen thousands of passengers, worked countless flights, prided herself on running a tight cabin. She had graying blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, thin lips that rarely smiled, and eyes that seemed to be constantly searching for problems. When she saw Jane, Joanna, and Joy sitting in first class, 3 identical black girls, young, unaccompanied, clutching backpacks that were clearly homemade, something shifted in her expression. Her eyes narrowed. Her jaw tightened. She leaned toward her colleague, Marcus Chen, a younger Asian American flight attendant, and muttered just loud enough for him to hear, "Why are there unsupervised children in first class?" Marcus glanced at the girls, then at Rebecca, confused. "There are several unaccompanied minors in this cabin," he said quietly. "That boy in 5C, the girl in 2B. It's pretty normal." But Rebecca wasn't listening. Her eyes were fixed on the triplets with a suspicion that had nothing to do with airline policy and everything to do with something much uglier. "Those girls," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Something's not right about this." Marcus felt uncomfortable but didn't push back. Rebecca was senior to him by 15 years. She'd been flying since before he was born. If she said something was wrong, who was he to question it? The triplets had no idea they were being watched. They had no idea that Rebecca Matthews had already decided they didn't belong. They were too busy whispering about their presentation, too busy being 13-year-old girls excited about the opportunity of a lifetime. Jane noticed the other passengers and smiled shyly at a woman across the aisle. Joanna showed Joy a new sketch she'd drawn of their water purification system. Joy pulled out a stress ball their grandmother had given them, and they passed it between them, squeezing it, giggling nervously. They were innocent. They were children. They were exactly where they were supposed to be. But Rebecca Matthews had already made up her mind about who they were and where they belonged. And in about 10 minutes, she was going to make sure everyone on that plane knew exactly what she thought. If you think every child deserves to travel without being profiled or humiliated, smash that subscribe button right now. Because what Rebecca does next is going to make your blood boil. But I promise you, justice is coming for her in a way she never saw coming. Let me ask you something. Have you ever worked hard to give someone you love a special experience, only to have someone else try to ruin it? How did you handle it? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because what Patricia Bennett gave her granddaughters that day was about to be stolen from them in the cruelest way possible. Now let's get to the part where everything started to fall apart. The moment Rebecca Matthews started walking towards seats 3A, 3B, and 3C, Jane felt her stomach drop. There was something about the way this flight attendant moved, deliberate, cold, purposeful, that made all 3 girls go quiet. They'd been whispering excitedly about their presentation just seconds before. Now they sat frozen, watching this woman approach them with an expression that held no warmth whatsoever. Rebecca stopped directly in front of their row and crossed her arms. No smile, no greeting. Just a hard stare that made Joanna shrink back in her seat. "Boarding passes," Rebecca demanded, her tone sharp and accusatory. Not, "May I see your boarding passes, please?" Not, "Welcome aboard, girls." Just a command that sounded more like an interrogation than customer service. Jane's hands trembled as she pulled out her boarding pass from the side pocket of her backpack. Joanna fumbled with hers, nearly dropping it. Joy handed hers over without making eye contact, already sensing that something was very wrong. Rebecca snatched all 3 passes and examined them with the kind of scrutiny you'd give a counterfeit bill. She turned them over, held them up to the light, checked the seat numbers against the overhead bins. Over and over. As if she was searching for proof of a crime. "Where are your parents?" Rebecca asked, her eyes still on the boarding passes, her voice dripping with skepticism that suggested she already didn't believe whatever answer she was about to hear. "Our grandmother bought the tickets for us," Jane explained, her voice quiet and polite, exactly the way Patricia had taught them to speak to adults. "We're traveling to Washington, D.C. for a national science competition. We're finalists." Rebecca's head snapped up at that, and for a moment the triplets thought maybe she'd smile, maybe she'd congratulate them. Instead, her expression hardened even more, her lips pressed into a thin line, her eyebrows raised in obvious disbelief. "Your grandmother," she repeated slowly, making it sound like Jane had just told her the most ridiculous lie she'd ever heard. "Your grandmother bought 3 first-class tickets." It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. The implication hung in the air like smoke, suffocating and toxic. How could your grandmother afford this? How could someone like her, someone raising 3 black girls, possibly have the money for first-class tickets? The words weren't spoken aloud, but they didn't need to be. Every girl sitting in that row heard them loud and clear. Joanna's eyes immediately filled with tears. She was the sensitive one, the one who felt every emotion like a physical wound, and this felt like being slapped. Joy shrank so far back into her seat she practically disappeared, her shyness turning into something closer to terror. Only Jane held Rebecca's gaze, her jaw clenched, fighting to keep her composure. "Yes, ma'am," Jane said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill. "Our grandmother saved for 2 years. She worked 3 jobs to give us this opportunity." Rebecca's expression didn't soften. If anything, it became colder. "I'm going to need to see identification," she announced. "All 3 of you, plus receipts for these tickets, and proof of this competition you claim to be attending." Claim. That word cut through Jane like a knife. They weren't claiming anything. They were finalists. They'd worked for months on their project. They'd beaten thousands of other students. But Rebecca was looking at them like they were lying criminals. Jane's hands shook as she unzipped her backpack, digging through the carefully organized contents. Patricia had made sure they had everything: IDs, competition registration, acceptance letters, emergency contact information. Jane pulled out the official letter from the National Youth Science Competition, the one with the embossed seal and the congratulatory message. She handed it to Rebecca with 3 student IDs. Rebecca barely glanced at them. She held the letter for maybe 5 seconds, her eyes skimming the words without really reading them, and then she handed everything back with a dismissive shake of her head. "These could be printed by anyone," she said flatly. "They look unofficial." Unofficial. The letter from one of the most prestigious youth science organizations in the country. Unofficial. Joy's breath caught in her throat. Joanna's tears spilled over. Jane felt rage and helplessness wash over her in equal measure. What were they supposed to do? What else could they possibly show this woman to prove they belonged here? A middle-aged white businessman sitting across the aisle in seat 3D had been watching the entire interaction. He'd looked up from his laptop when Rebecca's voice had gotten sharp, and he'd witnessed every moment of this interrogation. His face showed discomfort, maybe even recognition of what was happening. But he said nothing. He shifted in his seat, looked back down at his screen, and stayed silent. Rebecca turned on her heel and walked away, leaving the triplets sitting there in shocked silence. The moment she was gone, they leaned toward each other, their voices barely above whispers. "Did we do something wrong?" Joanna asked, her voice breaking. "No," Jane said firmly, though her own hands were still shaking. "We didn't do anything wrong." "Maybe we should just move to the back," Joy suggested quietly, her eyes darting around at the other passengers who were starting to stare. "Maybe it would be easier." "Grandma Patricia paid for these seats," Jane said, her voice stronger now, channeling every ounce of strength their grandmother had poured into them. She worked 3 jobs so we could sit here. We have every right to be here. We're not moving." But even as she said it, Jane felt the weight of every eye in that cabin. She felt the judgment, the suspicion, the assumption that they didn't belong. And she hated it. She hated that her sisters were crying. She hated that this woman had made them feel small. She hated that their exciting trip had turned into a nightmare before the plane even took off. In the galley, Rebecca was talking to Marcus Chen in a low voice, but not low enough. Marcus had been restocking beverages when Rebecca appeared, her face tight with self-righteous certainty. "Those girls are trouble," she muttered, glancing back toward the triplets. "I'm telling you, something's not right. Those tickets are probably stolen. They might be runaways. Their whole story sounds made up." Marcus frowned, uncomfortable with where this was going. "Rebecca, they have boarding passes. They have IDs. Maybe we should just verify with the gate agent quietly and let it go? I know trouble when I see it." Rebecca snapped, her voice sharp. "I've been doing this for 20 years. Those girls don't belong in first class. And I'm going to prove it." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He was 26 years old, barely 2 years into this job. Rebecca was a senior flight attendant with enough seniority to make his life miserable if she wanted to. He told himself it wasn't his business. He told himself Rebecca probably knew what she was doing. He told himself a lot of things that let him stay quiet. Meanwhile, more passengers continued boarding. Rebecca's entire demeanor transformed as she greeted them. A white family with 2 young children walked past, and Rebecca's face lit up like sunshine. "Oh my goodness, aren't you two just adorable?" she cooed at the kids, bending down to their level. "Would you like some extra snacks? Some coloring books? Let me get those for you right away." The parents beamed, thanking her for being so kind. Rebecca personally helped them store their luggage, made sure they had everything they needed, chatted warmly about where they were headed. Then she walked right past Jane, Joanna, and Joy without a word, without a glance, without even the basic acknowledgement that they existed. Her body language radiated hostility, shoulders back, face cold, movement stiff. She passed them once, twice, 3 times. Each time, the message was clear: "You are not welcome here." An elderly white couple settled into seats 2 rows back. Rebecca brought them pillows and blankets without being asked. "You just let me know if you need anything at all," she said warmly. A teenage white boy sat alone in seat 5C wearing headphones, clearly unaccompanied by parents. Rebecca smiled at him. "Traveling solo? That's so grown up. Let me know if you need anything, honey." But Jane, Joanna, and Joy, they got nothing. Not a smile, not a word, not even basic human courtesy. Joy leaned close to her sisters. "Maybe we should move to the back," she whispered again, her voice desperate now. "This doesn't feel safe." Jane squeezed her sister's hand, her own heart pounding. "Grandma Patricia paid for these seats. She wanted us to feel special. We're not letting this woman take that away from us. We belong here." But even as she said it, Jane wondered if she believed it. Because right now, with this flight attendant glaring at them, and these passengers staring at them, and this entire situation spiraling out of control, belonging felt like the furthest thing from the truth. And then Rebecca came back. She positioned herself in the aisle right in front of their row, her voice loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "I need to sort out a situation with these tickets before we can take off," she announced, her tone making it clear who the situation was. "There's been an irregularity that needs to be addressed immediately." Every head in first class turned. The businessman across the aisle looked up. The elderly couple craned their necks to see. The family with the young children stared. Even passengers still boarding slowed down to watch. Dozens of eyes, all focused on 3 13-year-old girls who'd done absolutely nothing wrong except exist in a space where someone had decided they didn't belong. Joanna was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. Joy stared at her lap, her whole body trembling. Jane sat rigid, her fists clenched so tight her nails dug into her palms, fighting back her own tears. Because if she started crying, she didn't think she'd be able to stop. They felt judged. They felt exposed. They felt humiliated. And the worst part? The absolute worst part? They felt like maybe they'd done something wrong. Like maybe they were the problem. Like maybe people who looked like them really didn't belong in first class. no matter what their grandmother had sacrificed to put them there. That's what racism does. It makes you question yourself, even when you've done nothing wrong. It makes you feel guilty for existing. It makes you feel small. And Rebecca Matthews was just getting started. If this story is making you angry, if you're feeling what these girls felt, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens next is going to show you exactly how far Rebecca is willing to go to humiliate these children. But I promise you, someone is watching. And Rebecca has no idea what's about to hit her. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a situation where you knew someone was being treated unfairly, but you stayed silent because you didn't want to get involved? What would you do differently now? Share your thoughts in the comments, because in a few minutes, you're going to see exactly what happens when good people finally speak up. Now, let's talk about what Rebecca did next. And trust me, it gets so much worse before it gets meh. What Rebecca Matthews did next wasn't just unprofessional. It wasn't just cruel. It was a calculated public humiliation of 3 children who had no way to defend themselves. And she did it loud enough to make sure everyone knew exactly what she thought of Jane, Joanna, and Joy Bennett. Rebecca pulled out her radio and held it close to her mouth, but her voice was deliberately loud. Loud enough for every passenger in first class to hear every single word. Gate agent, this is Rebecca Matthews on flight 447. I need immediate verification on suspicious minors in first class. Repeat, suspicious minors in seats 3A, 3B, and 3C. Suspicious minors. She said it like she was reporting a crime in progress. The gate agent's voice crackled back through the radio, professional and confused. Can you provide the seat numbers again and describe the situation? Rebecca looked directly at Jane, Joanna, and Joy as she spoke, made eye contact with each of them, wanted them to know this was about them. Seats 3A, 3B, and 3C. She repeated slowly, her gaze never leaving the girls. 3 unaccompanied minors, approximately 13 years old. Their tickets don't match their profile, and I have concerns about how these seats were obtained. Their profile. What profile? The only thing Rebecca knew about these girls was what she could see with her eyes. And what she saw were 3 young black girls who she decided didn't belong. Joanna broke. The tears she'd been holding back came in silent streams down her face. She tried to cry quietly, tried not to make a scene, but her whole body shook with the effort of keeping her sobs silent. Jane immediately put her arm around her sister, pulling her close, trying to shield her from the stares of everyone around them. But Jane's own face was crumbling too. Joy stared straight ahead at the seat in front of her, completely frozen, her hands gripping her armrests so tight her knuckles had gone white. And then Rebecca made an announcement that would haunt these girls for years to come. She picked up the PA system microphone, and her voice filled the entire first-class cabin with crystal clarity. Attention passengers. Until we can resolve a ticketing situation, the passengers in seats 3A, 3B, and 3C will not receive beverage or food service. They are not confirmed passengers at this time. We apologize for any inconvenience and appreciate your patience. Not confirmed passengers. She just announced to an entire cabin full of people that 3 children were frauds, criminals, thieves. Marcus Chen, the other flight attendant, began the pre-departure beverage service. He moved through the cabin with his cart, offering water, juice, coffee, and soda to every single passenger. Row by row, seat by seat, he worked his way forward. The elderly couple got their drinks, the businessman got his coffee, the family with young children got juice boxes for the kids, the teenage boy in 5C got a Coke, and then Marcus reached row 3. He looked at Jane, Joanna, and Joy. 3 identical faces, 2 of them streaked with tears, all 3 of them silently begging for just basic human kindness. Marcus's cart was full of drinks, water, juice, everything these girls needed. But Rebecca was watching him from the galley, her arms crossed, her expression daring him to disobey her orders. Marcus walked right past them. Didn't stop, didn't make eye contact, went straight to the row behind them, and continued serving drinks like Jane, Joanna, and Joy were invisible. Joy's voice came out small and cracked when she finally spoke. "Excuse me," she said quietly, looking up at Marcus as he passed. "Could we please have some water?" Marcus froze. He heard her. Everyone around them heard her. For a moment, he looked like he might actually help. But then Rebecca's voice cut through the cabin like ice. "Service is for confirmed, ticketed passengers only," Rebecca called out from the galley, making sure everyone heard. "Once your situation is verified, you'll receive service. Until then, please remain in your seats and do not disturb the crew." Joy's face crumpled. She turned back to face forward, her request denied in front of everyone, treated like she was asking for something she didn't deserve, like water. Basic water was a privilege she hadn't earned. The businessman in seat 3D had been watching all of this with growing discomfort. He was a white man in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit, clearly someone with authority in his normal life. And finally, he spoke up. "Excuse me," he said, his voice firm as he looked at Rebecca. "These girls clearly have boarding passes. They've shown you documentation. Why exactly are they being treated this way?" Rebecca's expression hardened as she turned to face him. "Sir, this is airline business and a security matter. I need you to remain in your seat and let the crew handle this situation appropriately." "But they haven't done anything wrong," he pressed. "I've been sitting here watching, and they've been nothing but polite and—" "Sir," Rebecca interrupted, her voice sharp, "if you continue to interfere with crew operations, I'll have to report you as a disruptive passenger. Is that what you want?" The businessman's face flushed. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Jane, Joanna, and Joy with something like apology in his eyes, and then he turned back to his laptop. He'd tried, but not hard enough. And now 3 children knew that speaking up wasn't enough, not when the person with power refused to listen. The plane was still at the gate, boarding complete, but departure delayed. Rebecca picked up the PA system again. "If anyone in this cabin recognizes these 3 young girls or can verify their guardianship, please press your call button immediately. We need confirmation before we can proceed with departure." The humiliation was suffocating. Every passenger was now looking at them, studying them, whispering to each other. Jane heard the murmurs all around them. Who are they? Why would someone buy kids first-class tickets? Do you think they ran away? Maybe their parents don't know where they are. An older white woman 2 rows ahead turned completely around in her seat to stare at the triplets. Then she looked at Rebecca with concern on her face. "Have you called the police?" she asked, her voice carrying through the quiet cabin. "You never know these days. They could be in danger, or dangerous." Dangerous. 3 13-year-old girls clutching backpacks their grandmother embroidered. Dangerous. Joanna's sobs became audible. Joy had started rocking slightly, a self-soothing motion she'd developed after their parents died. Jane sat frozen, her arms still around Joanna, her mind screaming with things she wanted to say, but knowing that any emotion, any anger, any tears would be used against them. Would prove Rebecca right somehow. Marcus Chen couldn't take it anymore. He saw those 3 girls suffering, saw the way everyone was looking at them, and his conscience finally broke through his fear. When Rebecca stepped into the cockpit to speak with the captain, Marcus quickly grabbed 3 bottles of water from his cart. He moved fast, walking to row 3 and placing the bottles on their tray tables in one smooth motion. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry." For just a second, Jane felt hope. Someone saw them, someone cared, someone was treating them like human beings who deserved basic dignity. And then Rebecca came out of the cockpit and saw the water bottles. Her face went red with fury. She marched over to row 3, and her voice could probably be heard in economy class. "Marcus, what did you just do?" She didn't wait for an answer. She reached across the girls and grabbed all 3 water bottles off their tray tables, her movements aggressive enough that Jane flinched. "I gave explicit instructions that these passengers receive no service until verification." Marcus stammered. "They're children. They asked for water. It's insubordination," Rebecca snapped. "You are providing services to unverified passengers in direct violation of my orders. This will go in your report, Marcus. Do you understand me?" The entire cabin watched as Rebecca confiscated water from 3 crying children. Water. Not alcohol. Not an expensive meal. Water. "They'll get refreshments once their situation is cleared up," Rebecca announced, still loud enough for everyone to hear. "Until then, no service. Is that understood?" Marcus nodded, his face showing shame and helplessness. He walked away, leaving the triplets even more isolated than before. Even the one person who tried to help had been publicly punished for showing them basic human kindness. Jane's hands balled into fists in her lap. She wanted to scream. She wanted to call her grandmother. She wanted to demand to speak to whoever was in charge. But she knew in her bones, that if she showed any emotion, if she raised her voice, if she did anything but sit there and take this abuse, she'd be labeled as aggressive, difficult, threatening. They'd use it as proof that she was the problem. So she sat there, fists clenched, jaw tight, fighting back tears, being strong for her sisters, even though she was falling apart inside. The captain's voice came over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a brief delay due to a security concern that needs to be addressed before departure. We appreciate your patience and will update you shortly." A security concern. 3 girls with valid tickets were now a security concern. Passengers groaned about the delay. Some pulled out their phones to text people they'd be late. Others shifted impatiently in their seats. And many of them looked at Jane, Joanna, and Joy with expressions that ranged from curiosity to suspicion to outright hostility. Like this delay was somehow these children's fault. Rebecca returned one more time, now carrying a tablet. She stood in the aisle, her posture rigid with self-righteous authority. "I've reviewed your seat assignments," she announced to the girls, her voice cold and clinical. "There's been an error. First class is overbooked. You need to be moved to economy immediately." Jane found her voice. It came out shaky but determined. "First class isn't overbooked," she said quietly. "There are empty seats right there." She pointed to 3 unoccupied seats just 2 rows back. Rebecca didn't even look. "Those seats are reserved," she said dismissively. "You'll need to gather your belongings and move to the back of the aircraft. Now." "But our grandmother paid for these seats," Jane pressed, her voice breaking. "She saved for 2 years. These are our seats." "Your grandmother made an error," Rebecca said flatly. "These tickets were processed incorrectly. You don't belong in first class." There it was. The truth she'd been dancing around for the past 30 minutes. You don't belong. Joanna was sobbing so hard now she could barely breathe. Joy had completely shut down, staring at nothing, dissociated from the nightmare happening around her. Jane felt her world collapsing. They were going to lose these seats. They were going to lose the one special thing their grandmother had sacrificed everything to give them. And Rebecca Matthews stood there with a satisfied expression on her face, like she'd finally won a battle against 3 children who'd never been fighting in the first place. But what Rebecca didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that someone had been watching every single moment of this torture. Someone who had the power to end Rebecca's career with one phone call. And that someone had seen enough. If you're feeling the anger, the heartbreak, the absolute injustice of what you just heard, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens next is going to show you that sometimes the people who abuse their power actually face consequences. And Rebecca Matthews is about to learn the hardest lesson of her life. Here's my question for you. If you were a passenger on this plane, would you have spoken up? Would you have recorded it? Would you have done more than that businessman who tried once and gave up? Let me know in the comments, because in a moment, you're going to see what real courage looks like when someone finally stands up for what's right. Now let me tell you about the moment everything changed. Rebecca picked up her radio, her voice cold and final. "Ground security, I need officers on board Flight 447 immediately. Unaccompanied minors with questionable tickets causing a disturbance in first class." Jane's voice cracked with desperation. "We're not causing a disturbance. We've been sitting here quietly." Rebecca leaned in close, her voice low and threatening. "Lower your voice right now, or I'll document that you became aggressive with crew members. Is that what you want?" Jane went silent, trembling. Any emotion would be used against them. Any defense would be twisted into proof they were the problem. Within minutes, 2 security officers appeared. Jane, Joanna, and Joy clutched each other as the officers approached, their terror visible. One was a white man with a neutral expression. The other was a black man in his 30s, Officer James Wilson. And the moment he saw 3 terrified black girls crying, his jaw tightened. He knew exactly what he was looking at. Rebecca launched in before anyone could speak. These girls have first-class tickets that don't match their profile. They claim their grandmother purchased them, but I suspect fraud or theft. Their story about a science competition sounds fabricated. Their profile. That word again. Officer Wilson remained calm. May I see their documentation? With shaking hands, Jane pulled out everything. Boarding passes, IDs, competition letters, flight confirmations, the email showing the ticket purchase. Officer Wilson examined each document carefully, actually read them, verified the details. Unlike Rebecca, who'd barely glanced. Finally, he looked up at Rebecca, his expression hardening. Everything here is completely legitimate. Their boarding passes are valid, their identification matches, and their competition documentation is official. There is no issue here. Rebecca wasn't backing down. Officer, with all due respect, something isn't right. Children from certain backgrounds don't typically have access to first-class tickets. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I can tell when something doesn't add up. Certain backgrounds. Several passengers gasped. The businessman's eyes went wide. Officer Wilson's voice became stern, official. Ma'am, what you just described is racial profiling, which is illegal under federal law. These young ladies have valid tickets and legitimate documentation. They've done absolutely nothing wrong. The only issue I see is a flight attendant harassing passengers based on their race. Rebecca's face flushed. I never mentioned race. I'm following safety protocols. With what? Officer Wilson interrupted sharply. With the fact that they're black? There are other unaccompanied minors on this flight, but somehow only these 3 are a problem for you. The businessman stood up, his voice loud and clear. Officer, I'm an attorney, and I'm prepared to testify that what I witnessed was blatant discrimination. This flight attendant has harassed these children, denied them service, confiscated their water, all without legitimate cause. A young Latina mother holding a baby spoke up, her voice shaking. I'm traveling alone with my baby. When I boarded, she welcomed me warmly and offered extra supplies. But these girls, she's treated them like criminals. The difference? I think we all know what the difference is. More voices joined in. Passengers who'd been silent finally spoke up. This is disgraceful. Those poor girls haven't done anything. I've been recording this. Rebecca's face went pale, but she doubled down. These girls are 13. They're too young to travel alone in first class. It's a liability issue. Marcus Chen stepped forward from the galley. That's not true. Airline policy allows unaccompanied minors aged 5 to 17 in any cabin class with proper documentation. These girls meet all requirements. Rebecca spun on him. You've been undermining my authority. You provided them unauthorized service. I gave 3 children water. Marcus shot back. Water. Because showing basic human decency isn't a crime. The cabin erupted in agreement. The elderly couple started clapping. Officer Wilson stepped between them. Ma'am, these young ladies are legitimate passengers. They'll stay in their assigned seats and receive full service. If you continue to harass them, I'll file formal complaints with the airline and the FAA. Clear? Before Rebecca could respond, something happened that changed everything. At the back of first class, in seat 7F, a woman stood up. An older black woman with silver hair and a navy suit that radiated authority. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held fury. She walked forward with slow, deliberate steps. The cabin went silent. Rebecca noticed her approaching and opened her mouth to speak, but something about this woman's presence stopped her cold. The woman stopped directly in front of Rebecca. My name is Dr. Diane Porter, she said quietly, her voice carrying through the cabin. I am the Senior Vice President of Customer Experience for this airline. Rebecca went white. Her hands started shaking. Dr. Porter held up her phone. I've been on this flight because we've received complaints about discriminatory behavior on this route. I've documented everything you've said and done to these children. Every accusation, every denial of service, every humiliating announcement. I have video, audio, and an entire cabin full of witnesses. The silence was absolute. Dr. Porter's voice got quieter, more devastating. You called 3 13-year-old girls criminals. You denied them water. You confiscated water from them. You threatened them with police, and you did this based on nothing but the color of their skin and your prejudice. Rebecca stammered. I was following protocols. Children from certain backgrounds, Dr. Porter interrupted. That's what you said. Would you like to explain what backgrounds you meant? Because this cabin heard you, and so will our board of directors, our legal team, and federal investigators. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Please, I have 20 years with this company. I have a family. Your job is to serve passengers with dignity, Dr. Porter said coldly. Not to terrorize children based on your biases. She turned to Jane, Joanna, and Joy, her expression softening completely. I am so deeply sorry for what you experienced. You did nothing wrong. You deserve to be here. You belong in these seats. The triplets stared at this woman who'd appeared like an avenging angel, tears streaming down their faces, but this time, tears of relief. If this moment of justice gives you chills, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what Dr. Porter does to Rebecca next is exactly what should happen when people abuse their power. Now let me tell you what happened next. Dr. Porter's voice was quiet but absolute. I boarded this flight specifically because we've received multiple complaints about a particular flight attendant targeting passengers of color on this route. I wanted to see it for myself. Rebecca's face went from white to gray. Her entire body seemed to deflate. I've recorded everything, Dr. Porter continued, holding up her phone. Every word you said, every policy you violated, every discriminatory act, it's all documented. Rebecca stammered desperately. I was protecting the airline. Something felt off about the situation. I was just... What felt off? Dr. Porter interrupted, her tone sharp. 3 well-mannered children with legitimate tickets, valid identification, and official competition documentation. What exactly felt off, Rebecca? Because from where I stand, the only thing that felt off to you was the color of their skin. Rebecca opened her mouth, but no words came, because any answer would expose exactly what she'd been thinking all along. Dr. Porter turned away from Rebecca and knelt down to the triplets' eye level. Her expression transformed completely, soft, warm, full of compassion. I am so sorry, she said gently. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. You are valued, you are welcome, and you belong here. Joy, still shaking, managed to whisper something about their water purification project. Dr. Porter's eyes lit up with genuine interest as Joy quietly explained how their system could provide clean water to communities in crisis. You 3, Dr. Porter said, her voice thick with emotion, represent the very best of the next generation. Your grandmother raised brilliant, kind, resilient young women. Never let anyone make you feel otherwise. Then she stood and turned back to Rebecca. Her voice became ice. Rebecca Matthews, you are terminated, effective immediately. Not suspended. Terminated. Rebecca's shock turned to fury. This is unfair. You're making an example of me. I was doing my job. Dr. Porter's expression didn't change. Let me list your violations. Racial profiling, denial of service to paying passengers, public humiliation of minors, false security claims, creating a hostile environment, and perhaps worst of all, you targeted 3 children who've already lost their parents. You took what should have been a special moment their grandmother sacrificed everything to give them, and you turned it into trauma they'll carry for years. Rebecca tried to speak, but Dr. Porter held up her hand. Officer Wilson, please escort Miss Matthews off this aircraft. She's no longer employed by this airline. As Officer Wilson guided a protesting Rebecca toward the exit, she kept insisting she was being persecuted for doing her job. Every passenger watched in silence as she was removed from the plane she'd terrorized 3 children on. Dr. Porter turned to Marcus Chen, who stood nearby looking stunned. Thank you for trying to do the right thing. That took courage, especially when it meant facing retaliation. We need more employees like you. The captain emerged from the cockpit, his face grave. He approached the triplets and apologized personally. You are valued passengers, and I'm deeply sorry for what you experienced. You deserved so much better. If you believe actions should have consequences, hit that subscribe button now. Because what happens next shows these girls that sometimes the world does see injustice and actually does something about it. Have you ever seen someone face real consequences for discrimination? Share your experience in the comments, because what Dr. Porter does next is going to restore your faith in humanity. Let me tell you how this story ends. Dr. Porter wasn't done making things right. She upgraded the girls' return tickets and provided vouchers so Patricia could fly with them next time. She arranged a car service to take them safely to their hotel and competition venue. Then she shared something personal. When I was your age, I loved science too. But teachers who looked just like Rebecca told me I wasn't college material. They tried to make me believe I didn't belong in spaces meant for smart, ambitious people. I became an airline executive partly to ensure no child would ever be made to feel they don't belong on an airplane. The businessman from 3D approached with his business card. I'm a venture capitalist who funds youth STEM initiatives. Contact me after your competition. Minds like yours deserve support. The Latina mother brought her baby over. Other passengers lined up to encourage the girls, many sharing their own discrimination stories. An elderly white woman approached with tears streaming down her face. I should have spoken up sooner. Fear kept me silent. I'm so sorry. Marcus brought the girls first-class meal trays with extra desserts. The entire cabin applauded. During the flight, Dr. Porter sat with the triplets as they video-called Patricia. Their grandmother wept when she heard everything. I'm so sorry I wasn't there to protect you. Grandma, we're okay, Jane said. You taught us to stand up for ourselves with dignity. We did that. Dr. Porter took the phone. Mrs. Bennett, your granddaughters were remarkable today. The airline will make this right. I'd like to invite you to our headquarters for a formal apology, and these girls will never pay for another flight with us. The plane landed to applause. Passengers let the triplets exit first, hugging them and wishing them luck. At the competition, Jane, Joanna, and Joy channeled everything they'd experienced into their presentation. They spoke with passion, precision, and purpose. When the judges announced first place, the girls dedicated their win to their grandmother and spoke about facing discrimination but refusing to let it define them. The video went viral. The airline faced scrutiny but received praise for Dr. Porter's swift action. Rebecca Matthews sat through mandatory diversity training, looking resentful and unchanged. But the airline implemented new policies: body cameras for flight attendants, quarterly bias training, stricter consequences for discrimination. Dr. Porter testified before Congress, using the triplets' case to push for industry-wide reforms. 3 months later, the girls thrived at their new prep school. Patricia was promoted after her employer saw the news coverage and realized her value. The businessman's foundation provided ongoing mentorship and funding through college. Officer Wilson became an advocate for airline reform. Marcus Chen was promoted and helped design the new inclusion training. The final scene showed the triplets back on a plane with their grandmother, all four in first class holding hands. Patricia looked around at her granddaughters being treated with respect and silently thanked God for their strength. Text appeared on screen. Every year, thousands experience discrimination while traveling. If you witness it, speak up. Record it, report it. The final message: discrimination thrives in silence. Speak up, stand up. Every child deserves to dream without limits. The video ended with the triplets holding their science award, their parents' picture beside them, a legacy of resilience that nothing could break. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it. Because these stories need to be told, these voices need to be heard, and children like Jane, Joanna, and Joy deserve a world that sees their brilliance before it sees their skin. See you in our next video.